And the continuing standoff in Egypt between pro- and anti-Morsi groups is the subject of this morning's top story. For more, I'm joined by our international affairs editor, Douglas Herbert. Doug, thanks for being here on set. What's the remind us where we stand right now in the voting process, because it's already begun, the voting.
Absolutely. I mean, the main thing to remind our viewers is that this is not a done deal, this referendum. We are midway through this referendum. We had the first round last Sunday. We're going to now have on Saturday another round of voting. We've had 10 districts in Egypt. They're divided into governorates, if you want to call them that, which have voted, and that included Cairo, by far the largest, most populated. 17 remain. We have 51 million eligible voters. So it remains to be seen who's going to turn out. We had 31% turnout in the first round of elections, which is already low. And let's just remember, okay, so you had 26 million voters there. You have a population of 83 million in Egypt. So it's interesting putting this in perspective, that when we talk about this voting, it's still a very small minority of people who are actually going out and turning out at the polls to vote. That said, it's like we've just heard in that report, a very contentious referendum, a referendum that human rights groups, we heard Mohammed El-Baradei calling on Morsi to cancel the referendum. He's not calling for a boycott, wants him to reconsider, though. Human rights groups are just saying, let's have a revote, because regardless of the outcome next Saturday, for a lot of Egypt, for much of Egypt, this will be considered an illegitimate constitution in the sense that it was passed by a majority Islamist constituent assembly in which a lot of people, the secularists, the leftists, the liberals, did not take part.
Now, given that the vote's already begun, given that it's probably going to be carried out on Saturday, and come Saturday evening we're going to be commenting on the vote being done and dusted, what is the opposition trying to achieve here?
Yeah, what are they getting, right? They're not going to get the cancellation. We saw that Mohamed Morsi was determined to get the first round. He got the first round. Very unlikely he's going to call off the second round. It's going ahead. Even Mohammed El-Baradei seems to recognize that. What they're hoping is basically to mobilize in favor of, A, a no vote against this constitution, to show that there is a large segment of Egyptians who are opposed to the basic principles, the tenets enshrined in this document. But also looking beyond that, early next year when you have the parliamentary elections, let's remember that there will be legislative elections. They want to make sure that they have as large a presence in that new parliament to be elected as possible, because right now the parliament is it is dominated by Islamists who are seen as very closely allied to Mohamed Morsi. So they want to be a much more representative parliament in which they will still probably be in the opposition, in a minority, but they at least want their voices to be heard.
What's so wrong with this constitution that is getting tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people down in the street against it?
You know, if you're a critic of the Constitution, just about everything is wrong with it. They say the main complaints against it are that it weakens basic rights, basic freedoms, especially women's rights. Basically, women are seen as having upheld their guardians of the household. That's actually enshrined in the Constitution, and that they're supposed to sort of divide their loyalties equally between their roles as heads of a household, as women in a household, and whatever professional lives they may have. So there's no specific tenet that men and women are equal. A lot of people would have wanted to see that.
So the woman's place is first and foremost in this household. That's written in the Constitution.
Very much. The values that they are the guardians of the household. But also on a more religious note, you could see actually there on our screen, Sharia law. It's based on the principles of Sharia law. It doesn't say Sharia law is going to be the law of the land, but it says that will be the guiding principle. And it also assigns a role, and this is very controversial, to religious Islamist scholars at Al-Azhar University, which is the main religious institution, Muslim institution in the country. That's very controversial because maybe not in this government, but what the critics fear is that if you did have in the future a much more hardcore Islamist government, that could open the way to a further dilution, the critics would say, of Egypt's secular identity. As bad as things were under Hosni Mubarak, at that time the Muslim Brotherhood was banned, and Egypt did have a secular identity, for better or for worse.
And so with this wording, the religious figures could have more of a say.
That's the fear.
In Egyptian politics. What's likely to happen after Saturday's referendum? Because let's just assume it does go through, and this does seem like the highest possibility right now. And let's assume this also seems like a high probability that the Constitution is approved by Egyptians. the Islamists get what they want, the president gets what he wants, what happens after that? The protests stop and the country goes back to normal?
The perfect question, because as we just said, you have almost half the country contending that this was a vote marred by irregularities, in some cases fraud, people demanding revotes, saying it doesn't represent them, it doesn't represent their principles. So yeah, the country left with an illegitimate constitution, so to speak. Remember what I said earlier about how few people have actually voted and that there are 83 million people in Egyptian society. It's a very young society, the vast majority under the age of 30. These are the people who are ready and able, as we have seen in recent days and weeks, to remobilize into the streets. Now, I'm not saying there's going to be a massive eruption of protest, but given the record and how unpredictable things have been in what's been a very fluid Arab Spring and post-Arab Spring as it's rewriting its next chapter, anything could happen, really. You could have mass street contests, demonstrations in the weeks and months ahead if there is a sense that this is a constitution that was ramrodded, bulldozed over the heads of most of the population without taking into account their will. Be interesting
so you don't see this healing the divisions in any way, on the
probably
contrary.
not. What remains to be seen, I hate using that phrase, but I have to, what remains to be seen is whether Mohamed Morsi perhaps will get together and, as he suggested, be open to dialogue to perhaps changing or amending some of the terms that are most controversial in that constitution. And like I said, that's far from certain in any case, because the Islamists, if they do get a good majority of the vote on Sunday, they might just claim, look, we have a mandate. For better or for worse, the opposition has to learn to live with that. You are in the opposition. We're an elected government.
All right, Douglas Herbert, our international affairs editor here on France 24, thank you very much for your explanations for this morning's top story.